Stanley Kubrick blinded one of his own actors. He made a woman shoot the same scene 127 times until her hair started falling out from stress. He built a hedge maze the real hotel never had, and slapped a room number on a door that, in reality, doesn't exist. None of that is exaggeration for the camera. This is a man who ran film sets like siege campaigns, and today we are taking apart 10 stories that sound invented, because that's exactly what most people assume they are. They are not inventions. Some of them are worse than the legend. Let's start with the scene that broke a world record for the wrong reasons.
Let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you.
There is a moment in The Shining where Wendy Torrance backs up a staircase swinging a baseball bat at her husband. It's 2 minutes of screen time. It took, by some counts, over 100 takes to get. Enough that Guinness once listed it as the most retakes for a single scene with dialogue in film history. Kubrick wasn't chasing perfection for its own sake. He wanted the fear in Shelley Duvall's face to stop being performance and start being reflex. Actors describe him running scenes until exhaustion stripped away technique because technique was the enemy. He wanted the raw nerve underneath it. It worked. The scene is genuinely unnerving, but performance built on genuine exhaustion raises an uncomfortable question. What did that process cost the person delivering it? Duvall has spoken for decades about what that shoot did to her. Crying on command for months at a time doesn't stay contained to the take. Cast and crew members have described her hair thinning from the stress, her health visibly deteriorating over a 13-month shoot. One of the longest in studio history at that point. Kubrick reportedly instructed the crew to treat her coldly, isolating her socially so her distress on camera would read as real. The result won her acclaim decades later as a masterclass in psychological horror. It also became one of the most cited examples of a director weaponizing an actor's real suffering for footage. Kubrick never publicly apologized. Duvall, for years afterward, avoided discussing the film entirely. That silence tells you something the behind-the-scenes reels never captured. Here is a detail most fans get wrong. In Stephen King's novel, The Haunted Room is 217. In Kubrick's film, it's 237. That was an artistic license. It was a request from the actual hotel that inspired the exterior, the Timberline Lodge in Oregon, which has a real room 217 and didn't want guests refusing to book it. Kubrick's fix was almost petty in its precision. Invent a number, then make it iconic enough that eclipses the real one anyway. Fans now hunt for room 237 at hotels worldwide that don't have one. The tourism problem Kubrick tried to dodge, he ended up creating in a different form, just permanently and on a global scale. And the room wasn't the only piece of the hotel he fabricated from nothing. The hedge maze outside the Overlook doesn't exist at Timberline Lodge, and it never did. Kubrick built it from scratch on a soundstage and studio backlot in England, full scale with hedges tall enough to swallow a grown man completely. He shot the model of the maze from directly overhead for the film's opening aerial footage, meaning the geography of that maze. The one obsessive fans have mapped and remapped for 40 years looking for hidden meaning, was constructed as a physical object down to the inch. There is no CGI trick here, no matte painting. Somebody built a labyrinth the size of a stadium so that one actor could get chased through it in the snow. That level of physical commitment wasn't unique to The Shining. It's a pattern, and the next film shows how far Kubrick would push actors to sell it. A Clockwork Orange contains one of the most disturbing sequences in mainstream cinema. Alex's eyes forced open with metal lid locks during the aversion therapy scene. Malcolm McDowell wore actual eye clamps for that shot, not a visual effect. During filming, one of his corneas got scratched, and he was temporarily blinded in one eye. Production continued. McDowell has recounted the experience in interviews for decades, usually with a mix of dark humor and genuine residual discomfort. Because underneath the anecdote is the fact that the director allowed the scene to proceed after an actor sustained a corneal injury on set. Kubrick's defenders call it dedication to authenticity. Critics call it a preview of a pattern that would define his entire career. The film mattered more than the person making it. 2001 Space Odyssey consulted actual NASA engineers, aerospace designers, and scientists to build its space visuals. Which is precisely why when Apollo 11 landed a year later, conspiracy theorists claimed Kubrick had secretly directed the moon landing footage for the US government. The rumor has never died. Kubrick reportedly found it amusing rather than threatening. And according to people close to him, he never issued a forceful public denial, which depending on who you ask, either shows contempt for a theory too absurd to dignify, or a director who enjoyed the mythology his own precision had accidentally manufactured. The technical accuracy that made 2001 legendary is the same accuracy that fueled 50 years of internet conspiracy content. He built something so convincing it became evidence for the lie. That's not something you can say about many filmmakers. Audley Ermey wasn't originally cast to play Gurney Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. He was hired as a technical advisor. A real Marine Corps drill instructor, Ermey kept improvising insults during rehearsal tapes so relentlessly and so fluently that Kubrick scrapped the original casting and gave him the role outright. Much of Hartman's dialogue, the profanity, the rhythm, the cadence that made the character terrifying came directly from Ermey's real military training experience, not a script page. Kubrick reportedly let him run for minutes at a time without cutting, jump to capture material he couldn't have written himself. It's one of the rare instances where Kubrick's control froze, because he recognized something more authentic than anything he could direct into existence. But that authenticity came from a battlefield Kubrick himself never set foot on. Kubrick shot the entire Vietnam War without leaving England. For Full Metal Jacket, his crew found a derelict gasworks slated for demolition outside London, and detonated it to recreate the bombed-out city of Hue. They imported hundreds of plastic palm trees from Spain and wired real ones with fake fronds to sell the tropical illusion in a country known for grey skies and rain. Production designers studied combat photography obsessively to match rubble patterns and building collapse angles from actual war footage. Veterans who've seen the film have noted how convincingly it replicates the terrain. Despite being built entirely on a demolition site an hour from Kubrick's house. Why didn't a director this meticulous simply fly to a real location? Because Kubrick, by that point in his life, wouldn't get on a plane at all. Surviving production memos from Kubrick's sets reveal a man who treated set dressing with the precision of a military logistics officer. He sent multi-page letters over single props, dual types, chair placements, even instructions on how a specific telephone should ring. Some crew members have described entire days lost to Kubrick's insistence on reshooting for reasons that seemed invisible to everyone but him. Lighting shifts of a few degrees, a costume wrinkle, a breath held a half second too long. It made him notoriously difficult to work for. It also produced some of the most visually controlled films ever made, frame by frame, with almost nothing left to chance. The obsession wasn't a quirk that happened alongside the filmmaking. It was the filmmaking, and it traces back to a fear most people don't know he carried.
When he came to the 6th or 7th Malchik,
Kubrick stopped flying after the early stretch of his career and never got back on a plane. Every film he made from the mid-1960s onward, war epics, horror set in Colorado, satire set in the Pentagon, was shot within driving distance of his home in England. Vietnam, the American frontier, a fictional war room, all recreated on English soil because the director refused to leave the ground. That single very human fear didn't limit him. It forced him to build entire worlds from nothing rather than travel to find them, and arguably made his films stranger and more meticulously constructed than location shooting ever would have. The genius wasn't in spite of the obsession and the fear. It came directly out of them, which raises the real question worth sitting with. How many of the greatest films ever made exist because the director was too afraid to leave his house?